Dumelang Sanbonani and welcome to Voice Out with myself, Queen KR. Today we are having Anastasia, who is a social worker. We are going to be discussing a lot of social issues. Siyazi emalokishini, in urban areas, rural areas, people always face challenges, and sometimes those challenges need a social worker. So today we are having a guest in the studio, Anastasia Esngishilo, ukuthi uzositshela kabanzi ukuthi umsebenzi wama-social worker wenzani, and maybe nani ninemibuzo eminingi ukuthi ningathanda ukuthi nimbuze yona, of which on a later stage nizosendela yona on social media. So thank you so much, Anastasia, for joining us on the show. So let's talk about who Anastasia is, ukhulele kuphi. So sizoqala from Anastasia, the young child. So let's talk about that.
Wow, where do I start? Anastasia, I was born in Krugersdorp,
Okay.
but relocated to the Northwest
Okay.
around when I was 10.
Okay.
So that's where I did my schooling. So I grew up in between Bloemhof and
Okay.
Taung.
Nice.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that's where I did my schooling. I came to Joburg, I think in 2006,
Okay.
after completing my matric. So
Okay.
yeah, that's how I ended up in Josie.
Yeah. So let's talk about being a social worker.
Mhm.
And then you finish your matric and then you decide to go and study social worker. Why?
Not even.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not like I had to study social work.
Okay.
I always say to people when they ask me how did you become a social worker,
Yeah.
I said it chose me. I didn't even choose it.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
it's just one of those where
Yeah.
I came to Joburg just an ordinary girl with
Okay.
just dreams,
Yeah.
nothing in your
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
You can imagine at Taung, there's little resources to
Yeah.
anything.
True.
In Bloemhof, you can't dream out of the box.
Yeah. True.
Everybody feels like ngizoyenza nge-matric after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I had always had a dream to say, I'm bigger than this.
Nice.
So I came to Joburg,
Yeah.
applied in a few schools. In Kenya, it's money. Where do I get the money?
True.
So I got a bursary, fortunately, one of the departments, and they funded my studies. So
Right.
that's how I became a social worker.
Right. So what choose that? Okay, social work chose you. So what happened? Ukuthi choose ukuthi this is what I will be doing.
I think because of my upbringing, number one, as a
Right.
child.
Right.
You grew up in a child-headed household where you see so much social ills.
Yeah.
You grew up in a community where there's so much social ills,
Yeah.
and you're like, how do I change this?
Yeah.
Even with yourself as a person,
Yeah.
there's so much childhood traumas that you underwent, and then you were like, but no other child deserves to go through this. So it's your mission to actually go out there and say to a black child,
Yeah.
there's somebody actually to listen to you.
Yeah.
There's actually somebody that you can talk to.
Yeah.
So hence I'm saying it was how I grew up.
Yeah.
It made me so cautious of social ills within
Yeah.
our community where I felt like
Yeah.
I need to take a stand.
True. So njengoba usho ukuthi in the Northwest, somehow opportunities were limited, and a lot of social ills ngale kunokuba like it would take time for one to get help. So did that also contribute to you saying, okay, social worker will be my passion and something that I will do ukuyale?
Yeah, I think it's the resources. Number one,
Yeah.
you need to travel maybe a couple of kilometers, take a taxi at the time.
Yeah.
Huna mali. You come in the office, you sit in the long queue only to be told to come back tomorrow. Because of the lack of social workers at the time, the workload that they have,
Yeah.
they can only attend to so much people at a time.
Yeah.
So for me, that said to me, you know what, it's as much as you cannot correct everything,
Yeah.
but you can actually be part of the solution.
Yeah.
So I decided to be part of the solution.
And then so you become a social worker. So what are some of the issues kakhulu ukuthi uhlangabezana nazo as a social worker?
It's it's different because of I started working with kids at first, and I went to working with people that are suffering from drug abuse. So currently I'm in the GBV unit where I'm working with victims of abuse and domestic violence.
Take me back to you working nabantwana. What are some of the cases ukuthi bowudila now?
The most case I always say to people that touched me is a point where you find this vulnerable child deserted somewhere in a brothel. So I had to save that child. But it was a very good story, a happy ending because of eventually we tried everything to actually trace the family of the mother's family. We advertised through the newspaper and everything, but somebody came through. So it was a breakthrough for me when the child was saved and sent back home safely.
Sure. And lama cases lawa somewhere somehow for, are you a mother?
I am.
So, I mean, lama cases lawa sometimes would be so touching to an extent that mhlawumbe triggers like lobo sensitive in you. So how would you deal with that?
It's very difficult because I've got a girl child
Sure.
that I always have to be extra careful, extra.
yeah.
Sometimes I say I'm overprotective. So I wonder, will she survive in the real world?
Yeah.
But as much as I try to conversate with her, have a conversation to her to say, this is how it is. But working with kids made me even more sensitive to other issues, made me even more sensitive to who I surround her with. So it's kind of a tricky situation. You go back home, you had experienced the child who has been abused. The only thing you can do with your daughter is just to give her a deep hug and say, you know what, it's actually a blessing.
Absolutely. And then let's talk about moving to the drug unit. We have a lot of young people that are abusing substance, including alcohol, especially in townships. What are some of the solutions, more Pegile, as a social worker, that as society we can, try to look into those solutions so that sizokwazi ukuthi si-alleviate these challenges of drug and or maybe substance abuse?
I said to one of my colleagues at some stage, we actually dealing with the end product of what happened when the person started taking our drugs. You send this person to rehab, but this person still needs to go back home where
where the problem is.
The problem is. So we need to deal with the root of it. Make sure that we speak out as communities about people, about things about drugs. We know them.
Yeah,
they're our neighbors, they're our
them.
friends.
True.
We know them. So we need to deal with that first before we can say we're sending people for rehabilitation.
True.
And actually work within the family unit, because of you sending back this child to a family that has pushed her outside. She's been outcasted, and then I can't put my phone anywhere around this child. So even if this child had went to rehab, but the environment and the treatment that they get. So I think it's also our part to sensitize parents to say, actually be supportive.
True.
Be there as much as alcoholism or drug abuse, sometimes it becomes chronic. I've sent so many people to rehab 3, 4 times, 5 times. The same person. Just after 2 weeks, I relapse. Relapse because of so I'm actually saying to our government also, create opportunities. Let's say to those kids, when you are in rehab, what is it that you do? Mawufika rehab, so train kanjani to adapt to the outside world. Because if nya rehab, nya after the rehab, I avoid that. Because some of them, they would say, that's how they call me umsizo. Umsizo, and everything, but I got so bored. Mama ka mo wa umanya hore o fetsa borotho ka mama wa umanya ka mo o kere le msebetsi. So I go out ke lo bloma le majita ke feel hore I'm very strong. Just a puff, the smell of it triggers me to actually say, they'll say, man, just one puff, and then you feel lonely at the circle. I kind of feel like sometimes addicts, they become a support structure for each other.
True.
We might say it's very weird, but that's where they can speak about their feelings. That's where they can speak about their reality, because of, as families, we're so closed up that we sometimes neglect the emotions of our kids.
Especially from the dysfunctional families that we come from.
Yes.
That's very sad. And then you moved to GBV. And relationships. Let's start from the relationships. And omungwe ufihle msizi and try and talk to the couple or talk to the woman. And then asabalitu uyasixabanisa lo.
Yeah, boy.
So let's discuss issues around GBV. What are some of the ama cases ukuthi uhlangabezana nawo awe GBV, and then you try to speak to this person uthi kudala man ushaywa, and ama solutions awaqhamuki still.
True.
So how best do you advise a person ukuthi now uyashaywa every day or every weekend?
One thing I always say to people, that as a social worker, you're there to empower.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's the person's decision.
True.
Same applies in a drug abuse situation. I can take you to the relevant facility. I
Yeah.
can talk to you, give you
Yeah.
therapy,
Yeah.
but it's within you where you say, I want to quit.
True.
It's also a struggle that you need to fight as much as an abused woman that you stay in there. Because there's a whole lot of dynamics. Number one, losses would depend mhlawumbe kulo bhuti.
Yeah.
Ufuna ukuphuma, ngiphuma kanjani?
Akanandawo
Ngikana ngiyakuphi?
yokuhlala.
Uyayibona? Ekhaya bangixoshile 'cause
Shelters are full.
ngiyakuphi. Ama-shelter, maybe it's accommodation for maybe a couple of weeks. Then after a couple of weeks, where do I go? At least lana nginaso isinkwa every day. Lana nginayo indawo yokulala every day. So we actually need to also empower our women. It's not easy to stay in an abused relationship, but it's sometimes the dynamics around that people find themselves trapped to say, how do I go out? Because I've got no way to go. So you end up being a cycle where some of them will come in and say, no, angifuni ukuthi nimbophe, ngifuna nikhulume naye.
And then how difficult is it, especially as a social worker, to try and remove the children from these type of relationships where there's children involved and bahlala balwa, like this couple fights all the time to an extent that they fight, they beat each other up, and these children go to daycare centers with the same mentality, go to schools with the same mentality. How do you try and advocate for these children and also come up with solutions in such situations?
You know, we always say removing a child from their home, it's the last option.
Right.
We try rehabilitative measures because of it's not even a pleasant experience to
Uhlale
remove
home.
umntwana for uma wakhe. Because of noba yisdaka uma wakhe, but she's still my mother. Noba uyashawa umama, but uthando lukamama alireplace anything. So what we actually promote is to say, how do we rehabilitate the situation? But if it gets to extreme, then the best interest of a child comes first. You need to remove this child, place them in a place of safety for a couple of months or for a few days, so that you try to say to the parents, yes, uhleli in a house, mother endlini, but imagine now it's 20 kids in a house. This child doesn't get individual attention. So we try by all means to avoid such situations, but to extreme cases, you don't have a choice but to remove the child.
Sure. And then comes a situation where there's a man that's being abused. As society, are we also considerate of men? So before we go to abused men, do we also find the root cause of the abuser if is a man?
Okay.
So do you sometimes get to a space where you speak to the perpetrator? Uguti, maybe you are having issues, and try to rehabilitate the perpetrator?
You know, I always say to people, you can't give what you don't have. So sometimes we get involved in relationships. I'm broken myself. I've got issues that I never dealt with as a child.
Yeah.
So I don't advocate or I don't promote abuse in any form or shape. I always say to the abuser, as much rage as you had, you could have walked away, gone for a drive, gone out to breathe, jog, do something that take out that energy. But when you sit down with a man that is abusing this woman, you find their childhood also was kind of not that okay. They were exposed to abuse, so that's all they know. They were exposed to a situation where Uma stayed in the marriage, and then, you know, in the olden days, I found it very weird because my peers would say, umfana mengakshaya akuthandi.
Yeah.
So
I've heard that as well.
It's one of those things where we become so programmed to normalize it. So this boy knows nothing except ukuthi ubaba beshaya umama. So for yena, it's a normality to get into a relationship and start abusing this woman. You can see these people love each other.
True.
But there's this elephant in the room that none of them wants to deal with it. I think it's when we need to dig deeper. I was speaking to somebody and I said, childhood traumas.
Yeah.
Let's get that in check before you engage with somebody else. Because if I don't have love, what am I going to give you?
True.
Come to you and say nyakuthanda, but I don't even know how that feels like.
Or even love myself, for that matter. And then men that are abused. How many men come out to say, you know, you are a social worker and I'm being abused and I need help from endlini? Do even men go out to say, I need help?
DreamStream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. DreamStream, a place to create yourself. Record video, music, and podcast in our full-service studio. DreamStream, a place to create yourself.
It's very few men that come out because of the societal stigma that comes with it. Ushawa kanjani umuntu osilenda kanje? Ushawa kanjani intombazana hayi mina I could do 1 2 3.
Even verbally.
Even verbally, there's a verbal abuse that men go through. Uthi ufike endlini utshela ukuthi intanga zakho zihamba ngamaphosa, hamba ngama-BMW, uzongrasela la.
Yeah.
So for indoda, it's always difficult to go out and actually speak out. Nama-police stations were at a point where umuntu uzoza kimi athi bengile police station bafika bangihleka.
Yeah.
Ushawa kanjani umfazi?
Yeah.
So we need to actually correct the system on its own so that more men can come out and say, I'm actually suffering from this.
Yeah.
I'm actually being abused. We need to normalize that.
And then let's talk about the issues around schools. There's a lot of social ills that our children are going through and bagcina adapted to these situations. How best as society can we, engage kulama issues ukuthi labantwana bari 2000 it's the horrible generation, the most horrible generation. But then most uyabheka lapha sibuya khona thina, and then 2000 came, and with everything that's going on, what are some of the activities also that you guys are doing ezikolweni to make sure ukuthi labantwana laba are aware and bayaluthola usizo?
I think we've got groups that we run. There's social workers that are in schools.
Yeah.
We call them school social workers.
Yeah.
So they are there so that when there is an issue, a principal or a teacher can approach a social worker to say, there is this child with difficulty. And we also need to stop calling our kids a problem child.
Yeah.
The minute you say I'm a problem child, I'm a problem already. So why do you expect me to act differently? I'm going to be a problem. So we need to remove the stigma of saying it's a problem child. Let's try and find out ukuthi yini eyenza ukuthi lengane ibe kanje. Kwenzakalani ekhaya. You find those kids, they go to school, they bully other kids because of that's the only space where they can express themselves. It's only space where they are taking power from the next person because of power has been taken away from them at home.
Let's talk about mental illness, mental wellness, especially in our communities, from the rural to the townships. A lot of people don't want to admit ukuthi they need counseling. So how best do you advise people to go there and speak to social workers, go for counseling, go for therapy?
I think we, as communities, we need to shy away from that.
Yeah.
It's no longer a certain level of society's illness. At first, it used to say, the city, abantu abaphathwa depression, it's people with money.
Yeah.
So, uphathwa depression kanjani uhlala elokishini. So when you're saying I'm depressed, nobody wants to listen to you.
Yeah.
So we need to start conscientizing our communities to say this is real, it happens, and it's about how best do we deal with it. Especially also in the working space. Professionals get depressed and then we shy away from that because of we expect you to know it all. We expect you to be in control of it. We expect you to handle the stress. And everybody has the tendency of saying, sonke sine stress. So my level of handling stress and your level could be different.
True.
And then it's not an event that happened at the time that could have triggered me to go into deep depression. Hence I said it's childhood traumas. It's things that had happened. Eventually when you're taking and taking and taking, you're bound to explode.
And also our cultures or our religion, either way, you'll find bari munale, ndoda ikhali, ndoda strong, uyatefa nje mokhala. And then you find ebantwini besifazane, how uyatefa lo, msadi uthwara thipa ka bukhaleng. And like when you check, it's like our cultures, there's certain beliefs or certain practices that would like oppress you to an extent that you must. So how best can we change that as well?
You know, it's the thing also with, like I said, making our people aware. Mental health is real.
Yeah.
Mental health is there.
Yeah.
And it's also about being a self-aware, also emotional intelligence. You need to know, where am I at this point? If you feel that you're crumbling, allow yourself to and be aware, ukuthi, this is happening to me. So what we program to do, ukuthi, life is difficult. So you just have to go through those waves. But there's a time where you just can't take it. There's a time where you get into the very dark space where you don't know how to get out of it. That's where medication comes in, to help you with the mood swings, to help you with the the suicidal thoughts. Because of reality, I say to people, for somebody to be depressed, they don't actually have to look like umuntu osestradeni. It's the well-dressed, the well-spoken people that also get depressed.
And then there's a question that I've always had for the last few years, especially seeing the stats or the number of women that just gave birth or abayenza ama illegal abortions. Like immediately when a woman falls pregnant, how come like the social development or social workers don't partner with
Department of Health, yes.
Because like even this morning, there's a trending story of a girl that olahle umntwana emahlathini kuphi kuphi. Like we see these stories all the time. How best can social workers and doctors, nurses partner immediately when a woman falls pregnant, but like create a safe space? I mean, there's a lot of things that women go through immediately when they fall pregnant. Either the baby daddy leaves, either hormones take place, either like mental health takes over. Like there's so many challenges one goes through, and pregnancies futhi awafani. Abanye become suicidal immediately when they become pregnant. Like there's so many things. So how best can these two departments partner?
I think we need to acknowledge that there's what we call postnatal depression. The overwhelming experience, especially of first-time mother, whether you're a first-time mother or not. Like you said, hormonal changes, the environment changes. So I think we're making it a regular thing to say social workers need to come in. Those women go to prenatal classes or whatever. So we need to speak to those women, make sure that emotionally those women are in the right space. We prepare them to say, even though what's the plan? Because now this woman has to go through the emotions alone. And then we are shying away from the community that is very judgmental. Because the couple goes, the couple goes on Instagram, Anastasia, so women put on a facade and keep on going as if everything is normal. It's when the breaking point, the crying child actually gets to this woman. So this woman is in a postnatal depression, but nobody is actually aware of that. Umele ube strong, ukhulise umntwana, uzele umntwana. So our mental health, it's always ignored.
Yeah, because there are some people who ask about the baby, but not ask about you.
How are you doing?
But they don't ask wena as a mother that just gave birth, how are you? And then, what are some of the projects that you are currently working on that, that are exciting, Mhlawumbe? Are there any projects that you are currently busy with?
I think currently what we're working with, it's making a safe space for youth. We create programs, the Aboke Moja, where youth can get engaged. We actually do talks in schools to actually say, it's okay to feel like this. We actually do visits within communities to make awareness to say there's help out there. Because of, I once we went on another awareness where we found literally in checks, I think 3 or 4 women were bruised. You ask what happened, the other one would come to the other one and say, Chomi, you understand? So I think the outreach are helping, but also we need to actually go back to our government and say, let this not be a numbers game. We're dealing with real human beings, real emotions. Don't tell me about 10 cases or 20 cases. Tell me about the outcome of it. Who did you help? How is your progress with Anastasia? How is she doing? Is she recovering? So if ever you're going to give me my targets are crazy, I'm going to microwave these people give them a microwave treatment, and then there's still a non-ending cycle. So we actually need to say, let's go back to the root of what social work is. Let's go back to what it's supposed to do. Social workers are supposed to be empower people, actually be a safe haven for kids. So, but we cannot do that because there's so much bad luck. There's so much cases that are on your table. You end up yourself falling into that web of depression. And how do you say social worker is depressed?
And then before, like, I want us to tap into that, but before we tap into depressed social workers, including healthcare workers, have you ever spoke or engaged on an issue of single mothers raising children, and society would be saying, Guti, these mothers are neglecting their children. She's raising her children on her own, no baby daddy. She works in between. Abantwana, when they come back from school, there are those social ills where you find social workers ba reportelwa ngabantwana and all that. How best do you assist single mothers that are raising children on their own?
I think we need to go back to the root of being African people, where it's just not about me, my kids, and myself. But we've lost that moral as Abantu. Because if I've got a child, I need to be there for this child 24/7. I forget about myself. I lose myself in the process. So let's normalize to mothers to say it's okay to take a break. It's okay to just remove yourself from that situation and meditate. Sometimes it's actually you rejuvenating, you become a better mother to this child. But if ever you're staying with these kids in a 4-roomed house, you have to hear all the complaints. The other one is in varsity when this and this is happening. You're human. Eventually, to abuse ingani, but you overloaded yourself.
True.
So let's normalize with abo auntie, abo gogo to actually come through and say, can you bring the kids over for the weekend?
as well,
Can you bring the kids for the weekend? So that you can rejuvenate as a mother, find yourself. So you become so overloaded with everything. There's kids, there's financial issues, and eventually people say, but they don't know the inside of what's happening. Last, I was looking at an article of a woman that they said she committed suicide because she was a single mother.
Yeah.
She said, literally, wherever that I go, even to the bathroom,
And the numbers are
small
rising.
people were following me around. It doesn't mean that you're a bad mother, but it actually means you're getting overwhelmed. You're a human being. You need to recharge.
Sure. And then the depression around healthcare workers. Now, like, kabanga umameli inkinga zabantu abayi 100 a week.
What does that do to you?
And then when you end up being paranoid yourself, as you did say now, you become so overprotective because of the experience of working with children. And then my healthcare workers now, I mean, sometimes as a doctor or as a nurse, you end up becoming a social worker yourself because you need to listen to people's problems. So how best can you guys be assisted, including those that listen to Inkinga Zabantu?
I think we need to normalize the system where we actually say, when you work with people, let's make sure that you're okay yourself first. Let it not be just a job you applied Ixasa. Let's make what do we call it, where team building activities, a space where you can say to your employers, now and then go and consult with somebody and talk to somebody. Let's not expect people be on a battery mode, robotic mode, where they're just taking in and taking in. Do you ever think of how do these people recharge? They'll say it's your responsibility to go out and recharge. But when you recharge, they say you've been away from work for way too long. It starts being a problem where now you are deaf. But you got into this knowing, or what does it come with? But what about my mental health? And am I of any good to these people if myself I'm not okay?
And then in closing, what are some of your advices that you can give for people that may need services or social worker, and where can people find social workers?
It's in most communities, I think now the department is trying to make small offices where you can reach social workers, and then NGOs are calling now, whether it be FAMSA, whether it be Isanka. There is help out there. We just need to start talking, to speak out. That's the most important thing. To be self-aware, to be the emotional intelligence. Be aware of where you are. Be aware of what's happening around you. Let's stop normalizing things that are not normal.
True. And then with you, where can people find you?
Mina,
Maybe umuntu ufuna ukukhanselwa nguwe nje athi yo lo sisi lo ngifuna ukuthi angikhansele.
Mina, you can find me on my Instagram page at Bulikumbi. That's where you can actually contact me, and yeah, so we'll see how I can best assist.
Guys, look, the social workers are not doing Instagram. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so
All the
much.
best in terms of your future. I think, like all the best in terms of ukumamela inkinga zabantu. I believe ukuthi sometimes people don't tell you ukuthi, yo, thank you so much, ungisizile. But on Voice Out, we really do appreciate you helping other people. So thank you so much.
Ngiyabonga so much for having me.
Anyway, that was Anastasia, a social worker, a beautiful social worker. Owenza umsebenzi omuhle njengaye. So anyway, please make sure that you follow us on all social media platforms. It's Dreamstream. Ningakhohlwa, we do have TikTok now. And if you do want to follow me on all social media platforms, on Facebook, it's Queen KR Royal. On TikTok and Instagram, it's QueenKR_Royal, and on Twitter, it's Stlogolo Sabatlokwa. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the show. On the next episode, sizokutshela kabanzi ukuthi sobe sikhuluma ngani, obviously when you tune in. So anyway, go tswa go nna Stlogolo Sabatlokwa ke re, mwah.
All I need tonight is your